It's very easy. And yet, we do have barriers. And we do have things that have been constructed. And so, we can keep looking and thinking about the new generation. I want to say one last thing, and then I'll open it for questions. I was talking to J. Cameron Carter. Actually, I have this podcast that I do with Landon Whitsitt. He's the vice moderator of the General Assembly. And so we were talking to J. Cameron Carter, and he is a theologian at Duke, and he was talking about jazz. And he was saying jazz was so amazing because it's forward thinking, and it's a tradition that's forward thinking, and it's something that's always looking to how it can fill the space in front of it. And as he was talking about jazz, and as he was explaining this forward-thinking tradition, I thought, wow, what if our churches were like that? What if, as Dan said, we were present, future thinking? And so as we go out, let us think, let us pray about what is God calling us to as we think about community and church from generation to generation. I'm past my time, but if there is a question, Dan, what do you think?
I don't have a question, but I just want you to be able to relax because the pastors here have a long-standing practice of ignoring clocks.
Oh, good. All right. I'll relax then. Is there anything that anybody wants to, ask or add? Yes.
Problem getting young people to take leadership roles because of their time limitations.
Absolutely.
That seems to be like a kind of thing that I hear a lot. Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, I went to a school fair a couple years ago. My daughter wanted to go into Girl Scouts. And I went up, and I don't know what was going on. Maybe like the Girl Scout troop leaders were sick of the slackers or something. But anyways, I went up to the Girl Scout troop leader, and I said, my daughter would like to go for Girl Scouts. And she said, well, you know, your daughter isn't the only one signing up. You are signing up for Girl Scouts. And I said, okay, that's okay. I said, but, well, I work a full-time job, and I travel, and I write, and I'm a little concerned. Do you have something for, do you have like the working moms Girl Scouts anywhere? And evidently there is a working moms Girl Scouts. But I literally ran from that booth. I was so scared of taking on something else. And sometimes in our congregations, sometimes when a young adult comes in, or when a young family, or when someone comes in, usually there's two responses, right? There's either the ignore them response, I mean, you all know, or the vulture. Like it's new blood. I mean, I've had young adults explain to me, like they walked into church, and within 15 minutes, you know, people were sending them pledge cards, signing them up to for Sunday school teaching, for, you know, so it's either one, and it's, you know, this art of listening and hearing what people have to say is really important. And when people say, I'm sorry, I just don't have time, if you can back away a little bit, that helps. But you're right. You know, on one hand, I'm saying we need sharing leadership,
On another hand, I'm saying there's not a lot of time. So that's something that's going to be important for us to figure out. What does leadership look like in the future? We have a worship committee. I have a great church, but it's a church, right? It's a church. We have a worship committee where we talk about things that most moms who have not much time on their hands don't want to spend their time talking about. What color the candles are at Advent, and how we're going to slice up the bread, and what kind of bread we're going to have. And these are, I'm not saying that these aren't important questions, because they are. They're very important. But for a mom, or for someone who is single, who's coming in, who's working 60, 80 hours a week, who's sitting there going, I don't care. You cut it any way you want, So there's that tension that's going on. But yeah, you're right. The time issue is huge. It's huge. Yes?
In your book, you spoke of the importance of when a single person comes into the church, that they see other singles there.
Right.
What are some of your practical ideas for making people feel welcome in this respect, that they're not alone when they, in their age group when they come into the church?
I have a lot of conversation partners who are part of the emerging church, and a lot of people will say, well, I read this one article in Presbyterian Outlook, it was several years ago, but they said, okay, in the emerging church, okay, they said, what you need to do is you need to take all the pews out and put in thrift store couches into and that's how you'll get the young adults in. And they didn't say young adult, but this is what the emerging church is doing. And you need to take out the pews, and I'm reading this thinking, gosh, we just changed the Advent candles from purple to blue and almost had a riot on our hands. Like, there's no way we're taking out the pews and adding couches there. This is just not going to happen. And so I laughed a lot about that. But one thing that I began to understand is that people don't like to go into church and sit alone. And that's one of the biggest barriers for people when they come to church and sit alone. So, first of all, make sure people aren't sitting alone. Also, if you can begin to think about what singles would like to do, and there's probably a few of them in your church, every church, there's always few people, and see what we have done in our congregation is the group calls themselves crosslinks, because young adults, that slippery term, they are not, when they started getting 39, they were worried about like aging out, like can we no longer be a part of this group because we're a little too old. So they began a group called Crosslinks, and they have potlucks. They go to the pub once a month, hang out. There seems to be a lot of pub-oriented, especially in the Presbyterian church, with young adults, like theology on tap, but I think you can't use that term anymore. But there seems to be a lot. But social events, or I know somebody who's using meetup.com. Is that big around here? No? Okay. It's DC thing, sorry. But social events, having what we did in our church, this is kind of cheap, but here we go. We actually gave choir scholarships to students to sing in the choir.
so that people would come in and see students singing in the choir and know that they were welcome there. I mean, you can do other things like having young adults lead worship, be liturgists, be part of that. But yeah, it's important that people know that there's somebody like them there. Well, there's a lot of intergenerational activities that we have, that we plan. So for instance, we had a Lenten series where we had someone from each generation speak about how God helped them make a decision in their life. It was very powerful because we heard from different places in people's lives, and it was a beautiful thing. We began to listen to one another. We often match college students or young adults or young singles with people who are a little bit farther down in their career, or a little bit, or maybe retiring or getting ready for retirement. So we make sure those conversations happen, especially with like related fields. We also, one beautiful thing I heard a group in Texas did, they had the Presbyterian women, and the Presbyterian women were getting very, very frustrated because the younger women weren't getting involved. They weren't stepping up, and they were irritated because they had given so much to the church, and they were annoyed with the younger women in the church. And so one time they just decided, they decided they would ask the women, what would you like? Instead of come play our reindeer games, what would you like to do? And some of the women said, well, I don't really know how to cook quick, easy meals, and you're always making these fabulous, easy, quick meals. Can you teach us how to do it? And so the women did that. They started having cooking lessons. Now, like for people like us, like we watch the Food Network because they do it. We don't always have time to do it. And so they were able to learn to cook. And there's many, many examples like that. But if we can get over maybe that frustration, and it is irritating when you've been working so hard for the church for so many years, and then, this new generation doesn't seem like they're doing anything. It can get frustrating. But if you can start listening and finding out why that is, some really beautiful things can happen through that.